Hey guys, so the durability update has just arrived on the PvE and I wanted to show you all the champion nerfs and buffs. There are so many changes there, around 80 if not more champions are getting nerfed, while only 1 or 2 are getting buffed. Try to guess who is getting buffed. The video will have chapters so you can find your champion more easily. All of the info in this video comes from Twitter from SpiderAxe, who is a league data miner. If you want to stay up to date with all of the changes, be sure to follow him, the link will be in the description. So let's roll with the changes. Pretty much every single champion that has either heal or shield is gonna get nerfed. There are a few exceptions and we're gonna go to them now. The champions that aren't touched are Master Yi, Kassadin, Hecarim, Sion and Rengar. So those are not gonna get changed, at least didn't get changed yet. There are a lot of nerfs, so let's go with them. Ahri, her passive heal against minions is reduced by 5 in the early game, 25 in the late game, and also 5 percentage points reduced on the scaling. And when it comes to the healing against champions, the scaling is also reduced by 5 percentage points, and the flat values are reduced by 5 to 35 depending on the state of the game. Aatrox, his E Omnivamp is reduced from 20-30% to 18 and 26%, this is probably a typo. Then we have E Omnivamp during ult reduced also by 5 percentage points in the late game, early it stays untouched, and then ult bonus healing is reduced by 5 percentage points at all stages. Then we have Akshan, his passive shield is reduced by 20 in the late game, it isn't touched when it comes to the flat numbers early, and also 5 percentage points scaling with AD. Alistar nerf, his passive heal is reduced, pretty funny numbers here, from 161 to 142 in the late game and by 2 in the early game. And that also applies to ally heal. Annie, her E-shield is reduced by 20 in the late game, untouched early, and 5 percentage points scaling down. Aphelios, his Severum heal is reduced by a little bit, 1 percentage point in the late game, half percentage point early, and then we have his Severum ult heal reduced, 25 early and 75 in the late game. Let's continue with nerfs. Azir, his E-shield is reduced by 10 at all ranks and 10 percentage points scaling down. Then we have Bard, his W base heal is reduced, 5 early, 25 in the late game. Then we also have W empowered base heal changed, but as you can see in the following screenshot, those numbers got adjusted, so those are the ones that are up to date. Camille, her passive shield is reduced by 3 percentage points from 20 to 17%. Then we have Cassiopeia E nerf, 2 percentage points lost on the scaling early and 4 percentage points lost in the late game. Cho'Gath, his passive heal is hit pretty hard in the late game from 71 to 52, early it loses just 2. Then we have Darius, his Q heal per target is reduced from 15% missing HP to 13%. Diana, her W shield is reduced by 5 at all ranks and also 5 percentage points on the AP scaling. And the bonus HP scaling got changed. It used to be 10% bonus HP, but it's gonna be just 95 bonus HP. So it's gonna be a pretty significant nerf here. Mundo, his ult base HP is reduced by 5 percentage points at all ranks. Ekko, his W base shield is reduced by 10 at all ranks. Elise, her spider form heal AP ratio is reduced from 10 to 8%. Fiddlesticks, his W heal against champions is reduced by 5 percentage points early and 15 percentage points in the late game, and W heal against monsters is also reduced by 5 percentage points. Fiora, her passive heal is reduced by 5 HP early and 15 HP in the late game. Also her ult base heal per second is reduced by 5 early and 15 in the late game. Galio, his W shield is reduced by half percentage point early and by 1.5 percentage point in the late game. This is roughly 10% nerf. Gangplank, his W base heal is reduced by 5 at all ranks, okay? And then his W heal HP scaling is reduced by 2 percentage points from 15 to 13%. Garen gets his passive reduced, he loses 20% early and roughly 15% in the late game when it comes to the values. Gragas, his passive heal is reduced from 8% HP scaling to 6.5% HP. Gwen, her passive healing is reduced from 70% to 60%, and passive max healing is also reduced by 2 early and by 5 in the late game, and the scaling is down by 0.5 percentage point. Illaoi gets her passive tentacle healing reduced from 5% missing HP to 3% missing HP, although it was later confirmed that it should actually be 4%, so 20% nerf on that one. Irelia, her Q heal AD ratio is reduced from 8 to 7% early and from 16 to 11% in the late game, so in the late game it's gonna be pretty significant. Ivern, his E base shield is reduced by 10 early and by 30 in the late game, and the E shield AP ratio is also reduced by 5 percentage points. Janna, her E shield is reduced by 5 early, 25 in the late game, and typical 5 percentage point nerf to the scaling, and also her ult heal per second is reduced from 100 to 90 early game, although it stays the same at rank 3, and we also have the classic 5 percentage point nerf to the scaling. Jarvan, his W base shield is reduced by 10 at all ranks, and his W HP shield per enemy is reduced from 1.5% to 1.3%. Kai'Sa, her ult shield is reduced by 5 early and by 15 at rank 3, and then the scaling is also reduced exactly by 10% with all the scalings. Then we have Karma, her E shield is reduced by 10 in the early game and by 30 in the late game, and also 5 percentage point nerf to the scaling. Her W empowered with ult missing HP heal is reduced from 20% to 70%, and her E empowered with ult bonus shield is reduced by 0 in the early game and by 15 in the late game, and the scaling is also down by 5 percentage points. Then we have Kayle, her W heal is reduced by 10 HP early and by 25 HP in the late game, and the scaling is down by 5 percentage points from 30 to 25%. Then we have Kayn, he gets his E heal reduced, 10 HP early and 30 HP in the late game. The bonus AD scaling is also down by 5%. His Darkin healing is reduced by 5 percentage points at all ranks, and the Darkin ult healing is also reduced, also by 5 percentage points from 70 to 65%. Then we have Kha'Zix nerf, his W base heal is reduced by 10 in the early game and 30 in the late game. Kindred nerf, his W heal is reduced, again some funny numbers, by 4 in the early game and by 21 in the late game from 100 to 79, and his ult heal is reduced by 25 throughout the entire game. Then we go with the Kled, his passive remount HP is reduced by 5 percentage points throughout the entire game, and also you have to remember that since the Grievous wounds are getting nerfed, his Q will be impacted by that. Lee is getting nerfed, his W shield is reduced by 5 to 25 HP, and his W spell vamp and lifesteal is reduced by 0 percentage points in the early game, but it gets dropped by 2 percentage points in the late game from 25% to 23%. Then we have Lilia, her passive temp heal is reduced both when it comes to the flat numbers and scaling, all roughly by 10%, and passive monster heal is reduced from 27 to 24 early, but in the late game it gets pretty significant from 104 to 75, and also the scaling is down by 10%. Lissandra is getting nerfed, her ult heal is getting reduced by 10 HP at all ranks, and also down 5 percentage points when it comes to the AP scaling. Lulu, her E base shield is reduced by 5 to 25 HP. Then we have the E damage AP ratio nerfed, but as SpiderAxe mentioned, it probably was meant to be for the shield, and then the ult base health is reduced by 25 at all ranks, so not that significant in the late game especially. And here SpiderAxe says that he's gonna stop posting all the screenshots to speed it up a little bit. I cannot blame him because it's even hard to read all of that, there are just so many changes. Lux gets her W base shield per hit reduced by 5 to 25 from early to late game. Malphite, he gets his passive shield reduced from 10% HP to 9% HP. Maokai gets his passive heal reduced, although it remains the same in the early game, but then it gets nerfed pretty heavily from 65 to 45, and the passive heal HP ratio is also reduced by half percentage point early, but in the late game from 15 to 11%, so pretty significant nerf here. Mordekaiser, he gets his W heal reduced, 5 percentage points at all ranks. Morgana, she gets her passive healing reduced from 20 to 18%. Nami, she gets her healing reduced and the classic numbers 5 to 25 HP from early to late game and 5 percentage points down on the scaling. Nasus gets his passive lifesteal reduced from 10 to 9% early and from 22% to 19% in the late game. Nidalee gets her E heal reduced. It stays the same when it comes to flat value early, but it gets dropped down by 20 HP in the late game and also 5 percentage points down on the AP scaling. Nocturne, he gets his passive heal reduced from 15 to 13 early and from 40 to 30 in the late game, but according to this the AP scaling actually goes up, so technically if you played AP Nocturne maybe that would be a buff. Nunu, he gets his Q heal reduced by 10 in the early game, by 30 HP in the late game, but the scaling gets nerfed pretty heavily from 10% bonus HP to 6% bonus HP, so 40% nerf on that one. And then also the AP scaling goes down from 90% to 70%, so 20 percentage points down here. Nautilus, he gets his W shield reduced by 5 at all ranks, and then the scaling is down by 1 percentage point at all ranks. Olaf, as Spiderax says, kind of dodged the nerfs. Instead of 14 HP growth like everyone else, he gets 9. So if we multiply 5 by 17 levels that you get, it should be an 85 HP nerf overall for Olaf. Orianna gets her E-shield reduced by 5 to 25 HP, so the classic nerf, and 5 percentage points nerf to the scaling as well. Then we have Poppy, her passive shield is reduced by 2 percentage points at all ranks. Then we have Pyke, his solo grey health stored reduced, goes from 10% to 9%, and also the scaling from 0.25% to 0.2% lethality. And also the passive grey health is pretty similar, reduced from 45 to 40%, and the scaling is down by 20% as well. Then we have Rakan nerf, his passive shield is reduced by 3 early game, by 29 in the late game, and 5 percentage point nerfs to the scaling. His Q heal is reduced by 0 in the early game, and, and by 30 in the late game, and the scaling is pretty significant here as well, by 15 percentage points down, so pretty big. And then the E-shield is also reduced by 5 at all ranks and 10 percentage points down on the scaling from 80 to 70%. Then we have Rel, even she cannot escape the nerfs, so her Q heal is reduced from 5% missing HP to 4% missing HP, and her W dismount shield is reduced by 5 to 25 from early to late game, and down by 1 percentage point, from 13% HP to 12% HP. Renata, her E-base shield remains the same early game, but gets toned down in the late game from 130 to 110. Then we have Renekton, he has plenty of nerfs too, his HP is reduced just like Olaf, he loses 5 HP per level. His Q minion heal is reduced from 3% to 2%, so that's pretty heavy. His empowered Q minion heal is reduced similarly from 9% to 6%. Then we have Q champ heal reduced by 2 early and by 10 in the later parts of the game, but the scaling is down only from 16% AD to 15% AD. And also the empowered Q champ is reduced. I'm not sure if it should be from 36 to 30 or what is it here, maybe it's just wrong, but it's reduced in the late game by 30 and down 3 percentage points to the AD scaling from 48% to 45. Riven gets her E-shield reduced by 5 early and by 25 HP in the late game, and bonus attack damage scaling goes down from 120% to 110%. Rumble gets his W shield reduced by 20 in the late game, stays the same early, and also classic 5 percentage points down to the scaling from 50% to 45% AP. Then we have Senna, in a similar case it stays the same when it comes to the base value of her Q heal in the early game, but it gets nerfed in the later parts of the game from 120 to 100, and also down 10 percentage points on the bonus AD scaling, but her lethality and AP ratios stay untouched. And then we have the old base shield reduced by 20 at first rank, and it's gonna stay the same at rank 3 it seems. Seraphine nerf, her W shield is reduced by 10 at all ranks, and the scaling is down by 5 percentage points. And then W heal AP ratio is reduced from 0.75% per 100 AP to 0.6% per 100 AP. Shen gets his passive shield HP ratio scaling reduced from 14% to 12%, and his ult shield is reduced by 10 in the early game, by 15 in the late game, and also down 1.5 percentage point when it comes to bonus HP scaling, but the positive is AP ratio stays untouched. Skarner, he gets his W shield reduced by 1 percentage point at all ranks. Sona gets her W heal reduced by 20 in the late game, it stays the same early game when it comes to the flat value, and the scaling is reduced by 5 percentage points, and W shield is reduced by 20 in the late game, so very similar, and the scaling is also dropped by 5 percentage points. Soraka, she gets her W heal significantly reduced actually, by 10 early from 100 to 90, but by 50 in the late game from 220 to 170, and also the scaling is down from 65% to 45% AP, so that's pretty heavy. And also the ult heal is reduced by 5 early to 25, with the scaling dropped by 5 percentage points. so mostly the W heal nerf here. Swain gets his passive heal reduced from 4% to 3.5% early and from 9% to 7% HP in the late game, so pretty significant late game. And then ult heal per second is reduced by 20 in the late game from 65 to 45, pretty significant at rank 3, and also down 5 percentage points on the AP scaling. Sylas gets his W minimum heal reduced by 5 to 25, and his AP scaling is down by 5 percentage points as well. Then we have Tahm Kench, Q heal is reduced from 30 to 20 in the late game, stays the same early, and the scaling is down by 1% missing HP throughout the game. His E damage to Grey health is reduced solo from 15 to 12% and from 55% to 40% in the late game. And when it comes to the duo, it gets reduced by 5 percentage points early and by 15 in the later parts of the game from 65 to 50%. Taliyah, we finally have the buff. Taliyah gets her buff. She gains 102 base HP instead of 70 plus 2 base armor. So she gains 32 bonus HP and 2 base armor. Honestly, it ain't much, but it's an honest work, right? Talon gets his Q heal reduced from 10 to 9 early and from 70 to 55 in the late game. Taric gets his Q base heal reduced from 30 to 25 and also gets the scaling down, as you can see here. And then W shield HP ratio is reduced by 1 percentage point at all ranks. Thresh, although he gets his W base shield reduced by 10 early and by 30 HP in the late game, he gets his armor growth now at 1.25. So with 17 level ups, he's gonna get over 20 armor. So overall, this might be a buff. Trundle, he gets his passive heal reduced 10% early, a little bit over 20% in the late game from 7% to 5.5%. Tryndamere gets his Q base heal reduced from 30 to 25 early and from 70 to 57 later on in the game, and Q heal per Fury is also reduced, although early it's only 10%, in the later parts it's from 2.3 to 1.65, so it's like 30% nerf, so pretty significant there. Then we have Urgot, his E shield is reduced by 5 at all ranks, and the scaling is down exactly by 10%, from 150% bonus AD to 135% bonus AD, and when it comes to bonus HP from 15% to 13.5% bonus HP. Then we have Vex Shield. It stays the same when it comes to W at rank 1, but then it's gonna go down by 5 with each level, and also down 5 percentage points when it comes to the scaling. Vi gets her passive shield reduced from 15% HP to 13% HP. Viego gets his passive heal reduced from 3% to 2.5%, and same goes with the scaling per each 100 bonus AD, but AP and attack speed ratios are unchanged. Q heal versus champions is reduced from 150% to 135%. Q heal versus monsters is reduced by a funny number 2 from 155% to 144%, but Q heal versus minions is unchanged at 10%. Victor gets his Q shield nerf from 30 to 27 early and from 115 to 85 in the later parts of the game, so pretty significant there, and the scaling is down by 2 percentage points from 20 to 18%. Vladimir, I almost forgot Vladimir existed. Vladimir Q heal AP ratio is reduced from 35 to 30%, Q empowered base heal is reduced by 5 early and 25 HP in the late game. His Q missing half heal is reduced when it comes to the scaling from 4% per 100 AP scaling to 3.5% AP scaling, but the flat percent, let's say, didn't get changed, and his ult heal from subsequent targets gets reduced from 50 to 40%. Volibear W heal missing HP stays the same early but gets reduced by 3 percentage points in the late game from 16% to 13%. His E shield is reduced from 15% HP to 14% HP, also down 5 percentage points with the scaling from 80% to 75%, and his ult bonus HP is reduced by 25 at rank 1 and by 75 at rank 3. Warwick, he gets his Q heal reduced from 30% of damage dealt to 25% damage dealt early, and from 90% in the late game to 75%. Xin Zhao, he gets his passive healing reduced from 7 to 6 early, from 92 to 74 late, and the scaling is down from 10% AD to 7% AD, so 30% down on the scaling. AP ratio is untouched. Yasuo, we finally have Yasuo. His passive shield is reduced from 115 to 100 early, so 15 HP down there, and from 525 to 475, so in the late game down 50 HP. Yoni also gets his W shield reduced from 40 to 35 early and from 60 to 55 when it comes to the later parts of the game, so it's basically reduced by 5 at all ranks, and the scaling of bonus AD is down from 60% to 55%, so 5 percentage points down. Yorick gets his Q heal reduced from 12 to 10 early and from 82 to 68 HP in the late game. Yumi gets her passive shield reduced from 60 to 56 early and from 400 to 360 in the late game, also down 5 percentage points on the scaling from 30% to 25%. Then we have Zac, his passive heal per blob is reduced from 5% to 3% early and from 8% to 4.5% per ult rank. Then a bit later on we also got Udyr change, his W shield got reduced by 25 in the late game and it stays the same early, and W heal changed from 2.5% to 2% early and from 5% to 5.4% in the late game, so we actually here might have the buff, but SpiderAxe assumes it's probably supposed to be 4%, so probably supposed to be nerf. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much for watching. My throat is currently pretty dead, so I'll let it recover for the next videos. And let me know in the comments what do you think about those changes. I'm really curious about your thoughts. Take care guys, and have a good day.